Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And as we inch closer to the official start of the offseason and free agency, we're going to take a look at some Orioles who are at a bit of an inflection point. In other words, their time with the team is kind of at a crossroads, either because of where they are in their career, performance, health status, whatever it may be. We'll break that down. We'll talk about what roles, if any, of those players could have with the Orioles in 2026 and beyond. And we're also going to get into what is probably going to be one of the bigger topics of this offseason, which is how do you fix an offense that came into 2025 with such high expectations, but really underperformed this season. And that'll be on tonight's episode. But first, as we like to do at the start of every episode, I do want to welcome a new member to our Patreon community. And it is great to see that we get a new member here in the offseason. And for that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, that is amazing. Greatly appreciate the support anytime, but especially as we're coming off a disappointing season, headed into the off season. Thank you so much, John, for signing up at the AA level. And I know I said on the last podcast that I have some first Bowmans of Elvin Garcia. If you want me to send you one out, just send me a message in the chat on Patreon and I will go ahead and do that. So yeah, thank you for your support.
Absolutely. And don't forget that we will have our prospects countdown, the daily top 50 prospects countdown, starting on Patreon a little bit later this offseason. In fact, probably in the next 6 to 8 weeks, somewhere in there. And we'll probably have other bonus coverage for patrons between now and then. So you won't want to miss out on that. And we'll get in now to our first segment of this episode, which is talking about some players who find themselves after the 2025 season at a bit of a crossroads in their time with the Orioles. These are players who have had success with the team in the past, but at least in the case of a couple of players we're going to talk about tonight, underwhelmed a little bit in 2025, whether that was a combination of performance, injury, or both, and discuss what role they could have, if any, with the Orioles going forward, and if not, what the next step might be for the Orioles. Do they look to trade these players? Will they try to non-tender them? And as we talk about players who are arbitration eligible, we're going to be noting the MLB trade rumors recently released projected arbitration salaries for 2026. These are not necessarily meant to be finite numbers in terms of predicting what players are expected to earn in arbitration, but they do give us a good snapshot of how the Orioles' payroll obligations could increase going into next year and where they could look to make some moves if they want to free up more money for free agency or trade. And I'm going to start with Nick in this segment because he picks a guy who just a few years ago was an all-star and a key part of the Orioles bullpen, but that really dropped off in his production last season.
Yeah, I'll throw the name Yennier Cano out there to talk about because he has been, as you mentioned, that 2023 season obviously was unbelievable, but he has been a pretty common sight out there on the hill. He's the last 3 years, he has led the team in appearances each of those last 3 seasons. 2025, of course, his worst year, ERA over 5, strikeout rate tanked down to 21%, fewer ground balls. Yeah, the FIP, the xFIP, expected ERA, all that looked a lot better than his ERA, but that doesn't cover up the fact that it was not a good year for him, right? He gets sent down to AAA at one point. A lot of articles and hope about the revamped changeup specifically and how hopefully that would help him in the second half of the season, but he still ended up kind of limping his way as everyone did pretty much to the end of the year there. But yeah, I just kind of feel like what are the thoughts on Cano going into next season? What's our stance on him? Is he even going to be on the roster next year?
I definitely see the argument that, he's kind of, after bursting onto the scene in 2023, he's gotten a little bit worse each season. Obviously 5.12 ERA, 0.1 FWAR for this 2025 season is not great. Strikeouts were down, walks were up, but I kind of want to hang on to him because he still has an option year remaining, and he's still going to be I think he's ARB1, or he's still going to be very cheap either way if he's under the last team control year or the first arbitration year. And his expected ERA was actually 3.54 FIP 4.27, XFIP 3.90. And while that's not elite and those numbers are not as good as his ERA in 23 and 24, I feel like there was some progress made with that revamped changeup. And I feel like the sinker, there was another pitch I feel like that they were messing around with that had some success at some point. You still got a 103 overall stuff plus. I think I would at least tender him a contract if he's arbitration eligible, and bring him into spring training and see what he's got there. I just think, a cheap, optionable, former success arm is a thing they want to keep around. But I guess we said the same thing about Danny Coulomb this time last year, and that didn't happen. So we'll see. But I'm holding on to Cano at this point, and I'm not counting on him to be a high leverage arm in 2026. But I at least want him as a middle inning reliever to start, and then maybe you can get him back into that fireman role at some point.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Bob here that I'm inclined to hold on to him, but maybe look to reduce his role a little bit in terms of where he's used in the bullpen. He's been used in a lot of high leverage spots in the last 2 years, and a lot of that was because of how well he pitched in 2023. And some of that was also that at various points in the last couple of seasons, the Orioles have had a hard time getting the ball to the ninth inning because of injuries, or when Craig Kimbrell was here, just really bad performance in the late innings. I think that what you have to look for with Cano, though, is one, can you get him into a comfortable 6-inning role, let's say, where he's your ground ball specialist? That's really his bread and butter, is getting ground balls. Yeah, he can throw hard, but the thing that he does when he's at his best is he can come in with first and second, less than 2 outs, and get you a ground ball and get you out of the inning. The real key for him, I think, is going to be that there were 2 pitches in particular last year that were really bad. You guys just mentioned one of them with a changeup. The other one was a slider. Really was hit hard last year. And he's never been a fastball pitcher. So to see him mix in kind of off-speed breaking balls to go with his sinker is not a surprise, but it also puts more pressure on him getting those pitches right. And last year he was struggling with both of them. So I don't know what the approach is going to be if you do hold on to him. Do you just really work on the changeup and say, all right, you're going to be a mid-inning reliever that gets by on primarily sinker, changeup. Don't use the fastball or the slider unless you really have to. Use them sparingly. Or do you just really lift up the hood and look at the whole repertoire here? Because there's just some parts of his pitch mix that aren't working.
Yeah, no, you're right. Just Fangraphs has their stuff plus. The sinker and the slider are both 113, which is, at least for the sinker, that's well above average. Hey, it's not 114 like Cameron Weston's sinker that we've seen in the minor leagues, but it's right up there. Borderline elite sinker. Sliders above average because the average stuff plus on that is a little bit higher in general. The changeup and the four-seam fastball are what, at least according to Stuff Plus, is not what's working out for him. But yeah, clearly, like we've talked about recently, especially, Stuff Plus isn't all it's cracked up to be, and pitch mix has a lot to do with it, and just tunneling, and you don't know, small changes can make pitches easier to see out of the hand for a batter. So clearly something needs to be adjusted, but I think the ingredients are still there.
Yeah, my take on Cano is, like, first and foremost, he's one of those players that, like, you're talking to your grandkids many years from now about the old school Orioles teams. Like, Yennier Cano is going to be a guy, like, I don't forget. And I give him a lot of credit too for being someone who seems very coachable, a lot of tinkering over the last couple of years. Yeah, I was going to bring that up too. It was like, what, 2 miles per hour lower this year. Obviously not good as well, but seems like he's extremely coachable, moldable guy. I was going to say kid. He's not a kid anymore. When he debuted, but a lot of tinkering over the last couple of years. Didn't, at least publicly, there wasn't that fuss over going around to AAA as well. Worked hard to get back to prove he can still do it. Of course, none of that matters if you can't produce in the big leagues and help this team win. But I just think that's an important note. And, the salary projected $1.8 million, obviously that's nothing. As you mentioned, he's going to have the minor league option still available. So he has that roster flexibility. So I don't think it's a guarantee he's going to be back in 2026. But it's odds are pretty high, I think, that he's going to be back. And I think there's reason he can be like effective, at least in 2026 in a new role. He's logged a lot of innings over the last 3 years. And specifically this year, right, the rotation being a mess at the beginning of the year. Yeah, it got better by the end of the year, but I mean, a lot of these bullpen arms were already cooked or traded. Kitcher's gone, Soto, Dominguez, they're all gone. So you're left watching Cano and Keegan Aiken close out games, which no one wants to do. That wasn't fun for anybody to watch. So hopefully if you add some good pieces to the bullpen, you rework the back end of the bullpen, move Cano to that low leverage role. I think there's a chance he could rebound. He's probably not going to ever dominate again, but if he can be a good low leverage guy who can help bridge from the rotation to the back end of the bullpen, that's hopefully reworked and one that we feel confident in next year, then yeah, I think that could be fair. Fair season for him next year. So I think it's reasonable. If you're out and just last year just left too much of a sour taste in your mouth, and you're just like, yeah, I don't see it. I'm fine if he is non-tendered or let go or whatever. I get it. That's fair. But I think it's reasonable to have some hope in 2026 for a little bit of a rebound.
I do like the note that he seems eminently coachable because, yeah, it seems like he has a really good relationship with the pitching development. He's always – I feel like you always hear about him. He went down to the minors, no issues, came right back. You always hear about how he's working on things with the coaches. So I think that they like that. They like having players like that.
Go over to Bob's pick now, because this was a guy that I was kind of surprised to see show up in this segment. But if you've read our Substack recently, oriolesontheverge.substack.com, you know that Bob came up with a trade proposal that would send this player to another team. So kind of curious to get Bob's thoughts a little bit more here.
Yeah, so my pick is Dean Kramer, and Vivek notes that Kramer has become a rotation stabilizer, and there's no doubt about that. It's not to take – this isn't the same as no spoiler for the third player or Cano, where that has been a big struggle of late. Actually, I think this might have been Kramer's best season overall, especially if you take out that first month. He just he's consistent, but at the same time, the reason I'm putting him here is his value will never be higher than his second to or ARB2 year, where he's only going to make around $5 million to be that innings eater, low fours, high threes, ERA guy, fourth or fifth starter who's going to eat 160 to 180 innings probably. And at the same time, if we're the Orioles, we have Bradish and Trevor Rogers penciled in the rotation. We want them to at least get one mid to top of the rotation starter, if not two. We also have Cade Povich, Brandon Young hanging around for depth. We have Tyler Wells available. Don't look too far behind in AAA. Trey Gibson, Cameron Weston, Nestor Erman, Levi Wells, et cetera, the cavalry coming up. I just feel like if you want to maximize his value, I think the move is to trade him this offseason while his value is at its highest, considering you have other guys that, they might not be as consistent as Kramer, a Brandon Young, or a Cade Povich, a rookie Trey Gibson, a Tyler Wells, who's, has a history of fading in the second half. But I don't know. I just feel like it's not a big drop off, especially if you're counting on Kramer to be the fifth starter at the best. If everything works out and Grayson Rodriguez is healthy, it's going to be, I don't want to waste Kramer as a sixth starter guy that's getting optioned, guy that's pitching out of the bullpen. His value right now is in a stabilizing, as Vivek says, starting pitcher. So if he's not going to be locked in to be that on this team, and if he is, that's fine too. But then I think you want to trade him while his value is highest.
I go back to every time I feel like I watch Dean Kramer pitch, and every time we bring him up on this show, I always go back to something. I think, Zach, you said this 2 years ago or so. I feel like that first Orioles playoff series, and we're talking about who's going to pitch, in that first series, and it was, if Dean Kramer was on another team, we would view Kramer a little bit differently, probably hold him in higher regard and view him in a little bit of a better light. But it's just we sit there and we watch the ups and the downs with Dean, right? And yeah, over the course of a full season, you look back at Kramer's season and it's consistent. It's 125 innings, 172 innings, 129 innings, 171 innings. ERA right there, low fours every single year. Walk rate 7-8% every single year. Strikeout rate 22% every single year. You know what you're going to get across the full season with Dean Kramer, and it's a perfectly fine back end starter. And yeah, you look at that salary. What's his projected salary for next year? 5 million or something, 6 million or something. Yeah. I'm not gonna be mad at all if he's in number 5 next season. Like, he's not someone you want starting a playoff game or a critical must-win game, but over the course of the season, he does his job. I would prefer an upgrade. I like that idea of using him as a trade candidate, especially if you're going to trade for pitching. A lot of teams are going to want pitching in return, and having a proven major league starter, I think, will help go a long way in helping form a package there. But at the same time, kind of to look at the opposite end of that, Brandon Young is hopefully someone in that, Brandon Young or someone else in that tier, right? Whoever it may be, long list name you just routed off there. Preferably one of those guys steps up in spring training and says, the job's mine. There's one spot left. Kramer's in the mix there. That job's mine. And yeah, at that point, you're going to wish you probably would have traded Dean Kramer over the offseason, like you said, to maximize his value. But at the same time, I'm scared. This last season scarred me. It's like, with the injuries and everything, the way it shook out, like, can you count on Brandon Young? Can you count on Cade Povich to take that next step? Can you count on one of these other younger guys truly stepping up when at the same time you know who Dean is? That's my only, like, that would be my only pushback there with, like, moving Dean. But yeah, I fully agree. If you can make a move to upgrade that position and using Dean Kramer to do that, you absolutely do it. But yeah, we'll see. It's just, I feel like the last couple of years, it's based on injuries and roster construction and the people in charge of constructing the roster. Dean's kind of been pushed into, he's been expected to perform at like a number 3 starter, maybe a number 2 sometimes, when he's not. If he could just be that number 5 role, I think it'd be a lot smoother sailing there. So there's bugs flying around, but smoother sailing there if he was in that position.
Yeah, and my thinking is we're going to upgrade from him being in that middle of the rotation guy to count on, and you want to have built in, and obviously the injuries are going to happen, hopefully not to the same extent as they did this season, but injuries are going to happen. But you want to have built in opportunities for guys like Brandon Young and the guys at AAA. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a thought. Obviously, he'll probably be our ace. He'll be the opening day starter in 2026. But
if that happens, we're in real trouble. But I will say this, that I probably have been, of the three of us, Kramer's biggest defender, might be the way to put it. What Nick said a moment ago, that's a point I've made several times on air, that if Dean Kramer had been on the Mariners, Marlins, Brewers, any other team in the last 3 years, it'd be like, oh, why don't the Orioles go get that guy to fill the back of the rotation? Why can't he be a younger, more effective version of a Kyle Gibson, Jordan Lyles type? And the one thing, and I still believe that is true, the one thing that makes me a little bit hesitant coming into 2026 specifically about moving Kramer now is that of your internal options, he's the only one coming off a full healthy season. Trevor Rogers didn't have a full season last year. Kyle Braddis has not had a full season in 2 years. Grayson Rodriguez has not had a full season in 2 years either. And then with Tyler Wells, you're also looking at about 2 years, maybe even 3 since the last full season. And he has not shown yet that he can hold up over a 20 to 25 start season in the majors, let alone a 30. So that's kind of where I'm conflicted, because I worry about the availability factor, but I agree with everything you just said, Bob, which is that if you can use Kramer as a pitcher to get you something back in return, especially if you're dealing with a team that maybe just wants to offload salary but is not doing a full teardown, Kramer might be a good trade chip. But I also wonder, do you hold on to him for another year and see if you can't do the same thing next offseason?
No, that's a good point. You could definitely do that as well. Or you can bring him into spring training in case of the injuries, just have him there and wait for a team that's desperate, that does have an injury, what have you, and they need an arm. Maybe that's the way you can leverage it. Or at the trade deadline, even if you're buying and selling at the same time, you do have 2 years of control. So it's not like you go into this offseason, we have to trade Dean Kramer. No, but I feel like he's going to, if he has another season like he has recently in 2026, then his arbitration number is probably going to be closer to 10 million. So value is a little bit less, but yeah, I think it's a nice problem to have. But I do think it's an inflection, just in that it is a, do we stay or do we go? Like, do we hit on 15 or stay? So
Just kind of looking broadly around the sport in the last few years, I would agree with you there that if a team is desperate for pitching, and let's say Dean Kramer is on the bubble as a fifth or sixth starter for the Orioles, that's got to be the first call you make, because how many late in camp free agent signings have failed over the last 4 or 5 years?
all of them, right? Other
Pretty
than
much.
Blake Snell got off to a slow start and then was excellent with the Giants,
Yeah.
but yeah, it doesn't tend to go well.
Yeah. Kyle, we need look no further than Kyle Gibson with the Orioles last year, for an example. I'll go.
Not.
No, let's not. I'll go to my guy now, and I think it's the one that he's the player that actually made me think of doing this segment in the first place. It's Ryan Mountcastle. We're coming off a season in which Mountcastle played in just 89 games and was largely ineffective when on the field. 250 batting average to go with a 286 on base percentage, 367 slugging, and a WRC plus of 81, which means that he was 19 points below being a league average hitter. And really, this is a continuation of a trend for Mountcastle where we've not seen him on the field as much as you would like in the last few seasons. He has not played more than 124 games in each of the last 3 seasons, and during that time period, he's hit 265 to 309 on base, 419 slugging percentage, and 38 home runs, only 7 of which came this season. He's projected to earn $7.8 million in arbitration this offseason, which will be his final round of arbitration before hitting free agency after this season. If you want to look for any positives in Mountcastle's production last year, you can see some things on his baseball savant page. His barrel rate and his max EV were up last year. And the one thing everybody said he needed to do coming into this year was pull the ball in the air more often. He actually did do that by a clip of about 4.5%, 14.6% this year compared to 10.1% last year. However, with the time missed and the largely ineffective production when he was on the field, it didn't matter a whole lot, especially with his walks being as low as they were, strikeouts going up compared to last year. And this is really more where I sit with Mountcastle now, which is I don't think you can have him on the roster next year, not with the September that Kobe Mayo had, not with the fact that first base is going to be an area of need this offseason. But has Mountcastle shown enough that you can get something for him in a trade, or are the Orioles going to have to non-tender him?
No chance. It's a non-tender. I was a fan of. I still like the guy personally. He seems like he's having fun. Like, he's a fun player to watch in the clubhouse or the field. He's goofy. He's singing "Dear Maria, Let Me In" on the Twitters. But his F4, I'm looking at his career high is 1.7 in 2022, and it's just gone down 1.6 in 2023, 1.4 in 2024, negative 0.4 this past season. I know he was hurt. He missed a lot of time. Career low walk rate, career high strikeout rate, career low ISO 117, terrible. And that's with a BABIP of 326. So it's just bad. And he's going to cost almost $8 million, according to MLB trade rumors. That's insane. There's no way. He only had 7 home runs. I think he's only had like 10 or 11 home runs over his past 162 games. It's just not good enough. He's a solid first baseman defensively, but I think Kobe Mayo developed into a solid first baseman defensively by the end of the season. And like you said, that September he had was the best on the team, OPS in the mid 900s, seemed to be turning things around. And you also have Samuel Basayo. It's also the one of a couple areas that the Orioles could look to upgrade outside of the organization: first base, DH, corner outfield, maybe right-handed hitting center fielder. But yeah, I just don't see any world where Mountcastle is tendered a contract, because the Orioles, if talk is cheap, but they say they're going to go spend some money this offseason, that $8 million could certainly be better used elsewhere. I would be shocked if a team was, I'm sure he'll sign with a team. Someone will take a flyer on him, but I don't think anyone's trading for him in order to pay him an arbitration cost of $7 to $8 million. So yeah, it's a huge no for me, unfortunately.
I tried to find an avenue to take the pro Mountcastle side. Truly did, just to play devil's advocate at least and expand the conversation, but it was impossible. I told my story the other week when we were talking about Mountcastle. Like, my first game as a credentialed writer, going down, Salem Red Sox, Frederick Keys, Keegan Aiken on the mound, Ryan Mountcastle over there at shortstop. Thought the future was going to be bright with those guys, but always been a fan of Mountcastle's coming up. And I feel like when we first started the show, a notable storyline back then was his transition to first base and you watching his progression over there. And so, like, yeah, first base defense isn't the most premier defense you want to look at. So that's not alone is not going to keep him on the roster like an Enrique Bradfield Jr. defense in center field or a slick fielding shortstop who can't hit a lick. It's not the case with the first baseman, right? That's where you need the power production to come from. And like you said, Mountcastle just hasn't had it. You can't throw just anyone over there at first base, obviously. We not to pile on Kerstad, but we watched Heston Kerstad try to play first base. That didn't work out. But when you've got Adley, you've got Basayo. We've been talking for 2 years now about Basayo's defense over there at first base. Big man can move. He makes stretches that a human being that size I don't think should be able to make, yet he does. We've seen it happen down there. He's a true athlete. And yeah, you mentioned Kobe Mayo. I keep forgetting about Kobe Mayo and thinking about this first base stat. If Ryan Mountcastle can learn the position and excel at it, Kobe Mayo can as well. I firmly believe that. And we know the Orioles are going into the offseason with a plan in place to improve the bat and help him there. And you mentioned that strong September. Like, that was a fantastic month of September. If that's a tease of next year, then yeah, like Mountcastle's like he's done. There's no room for him. There's no spot on this roster for him. He's very replaceable. You look at that WRC plus and his stats, and like $7.8 million salary next year, his projected salary. Josh Naylor and Yandy Diaz made $10 million this year. I'm looking at Spot Track, however you pronounce it. So if I'm spewing off like wrong financial numbers, don't blame me. But Josh Naylor and Yandy Diaz making $10 million. You're gonna pay Ryan Mountcastle $8 million next year? Like, nah. I think I'll pass. And with the trading, it's gonna be hard. There was just an article I was reading right before we came on. It was like 10 guys who, these 10 players, look for them to be traded this offseason. Ryan Mountcastle's on the list, but the guy who wrote it, the last line was, yeah, he's going to be non-tendered though. So he's probably not even going to be traded. Yeah. I just don't see how. If you trade him, what are you going to get? An 18-year-old international prospect who somebody paid $12 grand for that the Orioles are fascinated with for whatever reason? Like, I feel like that's unfortunately about it, which I'll take in return for him. But yeah, I think it's pretty good odds that he's going to be non-tendered. And I do, if he is, like I wish him all the best. I don't want to sit here and pile on him as well. And enough people have done that all year long. But I wish him all the best. And I do think in the right ballpark, right change of scenery, I do think he could improve and have a better 2026 and next couple of years. But I don't see any chance that it happening here in Baltimore.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, Nick, going back to us really covering him in the early days of the show. When we've seen the best of Mountcastle, he's been a fun player to watch. It's just also been a while since we've seen anything close to the best version of Mountcastle. And when I was putting together, some numbers for this episode, I went on Baseball Reference and I saw that there was an MLB trade rumors piece about the Marlins looking for upgrades in the offseason. So I clicked through because that meant that Mountcastle was mentioned in the piece. And I scrolled down and kind of the same thing you just said, Nick. MLB Trade Rumors basically says, well, he'll be available as a non-tender candidate to the Marlins if they want an upgrade at first base. So not just us who watch Ryan Mountcastle every day, but even nationally, people are looking at him saying this is someone that's going to get non-tendered.
That'd be fun. He can join Kyle Stowers and Connor Norby as the former Orioles who get some love on certain corners of the internet. And if he has a good year, which I would hope he would if he goes over there, we'll get to hear all about it.
Yeah, can't wait for them to go back to back to back one night against, I don't know, insert ace pitcher for some other team here. Yeah, fun times.
Yeah, it is going to be a joy. We'll go over now to the Orioles offense, which, as I mentioned at the top of the show, came into the season with high expectations. And it was largely the same group that had been one of the best offenses in 2024. Anthony Santander had, of course, left in free agency, but he was replaced by Tyler O'Neill, who was coming off a little bit of a resurgent year with the Red Sox. Of course, O'Neill missed a lot of time this season and wasn't particularly productive when he was on the field. The issues, though, didn't stop there for the offense. And there's a lot of things you can chalk it up to. It's injuries, it's young players not getting better at the point where you expect them to get better. It's Ryan O'Hearn and Ramon Laureano being traded at the deadline. But Andy Koska over at the Baltimore Banner had an excellent piece that was posted to their website on Wednesday that really broke down some of the offensive woes for the Orioles last year and did a good job of contextualizing some of this data. And I would encourage people to go over there and read the whole article. But I just wanted to pull a couple of things from it here to note, which is that they had a 24.2% strikeout rate this season, which was third worst in baseball. I would add on to that, their walk rate was up a little bit over last year, but their strikeout rate was also up over 2% from where it was in 2024. If you want to dig a little bit further into their swing and miss issues, here's what alarmed me the most from Andy's piece. We've heard from years about the Orioles' philosophy being wait for a pitch you can drive, don't chase pitches out of the zone. For the most part, their chase rate was really good this year, 27.5%, among the best in the major leagues. But the end zone contact rate for the Orioles offense this year was 80.8%, tied for fourth lowest in Major League Baseball. So in other words, when they swung at a pitch in the zone, they whiffed nearly 20% of the time. That's really, to me, the most disturbing stat in the whole group. But there's a lot of other things you can go on with. 235 batting average that was tied for sixth worst in the sport. 699 OPS that ranked 21st out of 30 teams. I'd also point out, too, 96 WRC plus after posting a mark of 114 a year ago. And if you want to drill down as far as Andy did to look at the Orioles on 3-0 counts this season, their 1165 OPS in that count may seem high on the surface, but it actually ranks as the sixth worst in the sport. Their 4.3 walk to strikeout ratio and plate appearances following a 3-0 count is the worst. So there's a lot of stories in there. There's a lot of things we can pull from, but basically what I took away from that was that the Orioles, despite not chasing at a higher rate this year or chasing at a high rate across the league, were among the worst teams in the sport when it came to swinging and missing at pitches. I'm sure injury was part of that. I'm sure the players that missed time were part of that, but there's got to be more going on here that they got to get to the bottom of this offseason.
Yeah, and I don't have the numbers in front of me to back this up, but it just felt like they were looking off speed breaking pitches a lot of the times in fastball counts, or it seemed like they had a plan of this is what this pitcher does, I'm sure, based on the numbers. And it seemed like a unwillingness to adjust or be. It just seemed like they got eaten alive by fastballs, basically in the zone, especially in fastball counts, which seems backwards. But I feel like we know that Gunnar can hit a fastball. We know that these guys can hit fastballs in the zone, but they just didn't this year, I feel like. And I feel like that could be an approach thing. That could be, who knows? But yeah, that's what to me, they have to figure out. You got to be able to hit the fastball, especially if it's in the zone. I mean, that's just baseball 101, right?
Yeah, I was actually looking at. I haven't looked at everybody. I was just looking at Cowser for something later on, and it was actually the like was it curveballs and sliders, I think specifically. Maybe change ups. He was bad both years, but I think sliders and curveballs. I think it was. Someone have to correct me if I'm wrong. He actually hit them pretty well in 2024, like almost 300 or something against both those offerings, and it was like 110, 115 this year. Like that was um, so not even just fastballs for some guys, but yeah, even before some of these, I pulled a couple of numbers. Baseball Savant has a really cool. They kind of can quickly list through, scroll through everything, and it'll show you year by year and plus minus how they improved, how they got worse, and then compare that to the rest of the league. And so, I pulled some of those numbers. Some of them Zach mentioned there that came from Andy's article as well, but and you just look, yeah, from 2024 to 2025. And again, 2024, the Orioles had the 7th ranked offense in baseball, according to batting average, 11th in on base percentage, 3rd in slugging percentage, 4th highest WRC plus. In 2025, they're 24th in batting average, 24th in on base percentage, 19th in slugging percentage, 3rd highest strikeout rate, 20th in WRC plus. Dramatic fall, but it was just, yeah, you had, let me see, the whiffing was the huge one that I noticed. It was the end zone swing and miss, like you talked about. Orioles were one of the better teams at making contact in the zone in 2023, middle of the pack in 2024. This season, they had one of the highest end zone whiff rates in the league, and it was the 2nd highest jump from 2024 to 2025. So, and it's been trending in the wrong direction for 2 years now. And the Yankees were higher on that list. They had the highest jump in end zone whiff rates, but the Yankees also led the league in barrel percentage and hard hit rate and bat speed, and had one of the most improved pulled fly ball air rates in the league. So yeah, it's like there were a lot of extra context there with that number for the Yankees that led to an even better offense in 2025 for them. But yeah, this offense was truly abysmal. The Orioles, they're beating the ball into the ground. And again, showing one of those bigger jumps in whiff rates among MLB teams. That's the most depressing part. If you're going to chase, I feel like that's easier. I feel like I would be less concerned if it was like, well, they're just chasing. They're not being patient at the plate. They're not being disciplined. They're being too aggressive at the plate. But when you're swinging and missing and all these strikes, I feel like that's the point that makes you go, it's not just going to be a simple fix.
Yeah, exactly. Because I know people were commenting on Jackson Holliday's lack of walks, at least at some point before he really turned that part of his game on towards the end of the season. And it was like, if you looked at his baseball savant, he was chasing less than he ever had. He was like, it was just, pitchers are not scared of throwing the Orioles hitter strikes because they're swinging and missing so much. That's the negative, but the positive is a lot of these guys are the same players. They clearly didn't just forget how to hit the ball. It must be like I was saying, an approach thing, what pitches they're looking for in certain counts. It seems like it should be fixable since they were able to do it before, and it's gotten worse over time. Hopefully that's something that can be turned around, because yeah, if not, that's not a great sign. But I do think that Dylan Beaver, Samuel Basayo coming up, I feel like those guys should help in that regard. I feel like Kobe Mayo getting adjusted should help in that regard. Having guys around all season to make adjustments could help in that regard. So there are definitely different ways you can look at it, but yeah, needs to get fixed. No doubt about it.
Yeah, it does. And I agree with what Nick just said a moment ago. I think that if I had really taken a look at the data at the end of this season and seen that they were chasing pitches more often and swinging and missing out of the zone, it would have been okay. Well, they were overcorrecting from last year. They need to find a happy medium. Largely, the approach has been the same, and yet I don't think anybody would agree that the fix is to be more aggressive in that regard. Maybe swinging at the first pitch more often. I think that that's a fair debate to be had, but swinging outside the zone and chasing borderline pitches more often is not going to help.
No, that's not the answer. It's just, I don't know. I'm not a hitting coach, but it seems like if you're locked in on one pitch, yeah, if you get it, you could crush it. but maybe being more ready for anything. I don't know. I'm sure they're working. I'm sure they're like freaking out trying to figure this out themselves and have much better equipped to do that but than us just sitting here thinking about it. But that is certainly, yeah, if you're swinging and missing at pitches that are in the strike zone, I mean, that's the name of the game. You got to hit those pitches, or at least if you're going to do it last, like the Yankees, you at least got to crush the ball when you do make contact. So.
Yeah, I was listening to, I think it was Monday. I don't know if you guys listen to it or not. I know it's CBS, but still, it's like the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast, like Scott White and two other guys. I can't remember their names, and I watch them. They're on 5 nights a week during the season. But yeah, it's good stuff. It's like fantasy focused, and they're the reason I won one of the podcast leagues this year. Never done Roto. I listened to them. I followed some of their advice. They're the reasons I won that league. And I think it was Scott White who was talking Monday about, they're kind of reminiscing about 2025 season and like hits and misses and like changes in some evaluations that they've decided that they were going to take into 2026 when looking at players. And Scott White specifically was like, I've been so focused on pulled fly ball air rate this year. And I've mentioned it over and over and over again. And he went back and looked like guys who are, the expected stats aren't matching up with their actual stats. Like they're underperforming. And for a lot of guys, he would look at pulled fly ball air rate and they're like, it's low this year. And on the reverse side, guys who are like overperforming their expected stats, but he look at, pulled fly ball air rate and says, it's like through the roof this year. And so that was like, he kind of felt like that's why that was a number that he looked at as very important in his analysis this year. And I went back and tried to look at the Orioles players. I'm like, all right, well, let's use that. And a lot of guys actually improved in that area this year. But then, yeah, like we've been talking about, they're not hitting the ball. When they do, it's a lot more ground balls that increase this year. And they're just not making contact with the baseball as much this year. So that proved to be a nothing burger when looking through all of that. But I don't know, maybe that is a sign though, that there are a lot of positives that, especially with individual players. You mentioned a couple there, Kobe Mayo, another one, some of these younger guys. Gunnar, we're not worried about Gunnar fixing this next year. So I do tend to agree that like the talent is there for the most part. But it's the approach, it's the behind the scenes stuff that it's going to be a long off season for a lot of people in the organization.
The thing is, like, unless you're going to do some huge shakeup where you trade a Jordan Westburg, you trade a Jackson Holiday, the core is the core. Like, these guys are here for the next several years at least. So, I mean, you can supplement. You could bring in a big bat or two. Maybe you could squeeze in a second one. But it's like the 2026 season is going to rest on the core of this team getting back to hitting the way they're capable of hitting.
And take the name out of it, right? These guys were all top prospects, and yeah, we saw them come up through the minors, and we know what they're capable of. Yada yada. You take all that projections coming into the year. How many times do we talk about this in spring training going into the season? I mean, every projection system had this offense being like a top 2, top 3 offense in baseball. So, and that's just looking at the raw data there. That's another sign that tells me like, all right, it's here. The pieces are here again for the most part. So it's some comfort at least.
Yeah, I agree, Bobby. This is the core. You've got to find a way to get these guys producing because they really are going to be key to this. You're not going to bring in a whole new infield next year. You're not going to turn over 2/3 of the outfield. You really got to work with this group, and that includes Tyler O'Neill. He's got to be healthy and producing somewhat close to what we've seen him do in the past because I think we were counting on, well, even if Tyler O'Neill misses 42 games this season, those 120 games are going to be pretty good. And we didn't even get that from him. And he struggled. I thought it was interesting in the offseason press conference that Mike Elias and Tony Manzolino both really made sort of tout him. Tony Manzolino, in fact, seemed to go out of his way to praise him, which I take as with some comfort, but I also know that he's just got to be healthier next year. And with his injury history, that's always a huge question mark.
No, yeah. I mean, we knew he was going to miss time, maybe not that much time. We thought he'd hit better while he was in there, hit for more power. To his credit, like he did have a lot of bad luck. A 218 BABIP, he had the lowest strikeout rate of his career, one of the highest walk rates of his career. It seems like the stuff he could control was pretty much what you want to see. It just was a little bit of bad luck. Obviously, the injuries, maybe do some Pilates instead of trying to max out your squats and bench press or what have you. I don't know. I mean, just I think if he is at least able to play 100 games next year, I think we'll be much happier with the results than we were in 2025. But he's going to be on the team. He's going to be on the roster as long as he's healthy. He's going to be playing. So yeah, need to get him rolling. And yeah, if he can just stay a little bit healthier, double that games played total, I'd be happy.
We all knew that was the risk, though, when he got signed. I'm sure the Orioles did too. And yeah, risk did not pay off this year.
I want to go to this question now we actually got over in our podcast mailbag channel on Discord, and this comes from Half. Other than Byron Buxton, who feels like an obvious answer to this, who is a star bat you could see being a surprise trade acquisition for the Orioles this offseason? And Bob, I'll actually start with you here because you brought up Buxton in your recent piece over at Substack. What are your thoughts? Is that the top target? Are there really any other names that you think could be available in trade?
I'm not sure. I know he was asked about this at the trade deadline because obviously the Twins traded anybody that was making any sort of money at the deadline, and he has no trade clause, and he said he wasn't going to waive it. Maybe that will be different in the offseason. I do think he'd be an amazing fit for the Orioles. Obviously, again, another guy with huge injury concerns, but when he's healthy, he, like in 2025, he is a star out there in center field. And my thought was, if you can get him to convince him to waive the no trade clause, that is the right-handed hitting center fielder you can pair with Colton Cowser. He can be, you can give him some time in the corner outfield and DH, bench him to try to keep him healthy, just like we talked about with Tyler O'Neill coming into this year. But I think in the clubhouse, he seems like a leader, a vocal guy, someone that players could look up to. It seems like a perfect fit, but obviously if he's wants to stay in Minnesota, more power to him. Other than him, I mean, I don't think anyone to his capability, his level of upside ceiling. You got like Brenton Doyle types. There's other right-handed hitting outfielders that could be targeted. Helio Ramos, maybe. He's not a center fielder, not much of a fielder at all, but it could be a right-handed bat you could bring in. There's some possibilities, but until the offseason really kicks into high gear and we start seeing rumors left and right, then I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't know either. I do think, though, when looking ahead, and again, I don't even want to sit here and like pound the table for anybody after last offseason was just such a big disappointment and a letdown. We think we're putting puzzle pieces together, and that was all for nothing. But when I'm looking at the offseason, though, I feel like when it comes to the bats, I would like to see this team trade for the bat that they want. Trade for the big time impact bat. Of course, we all want Kyle Tucker, right? Some people may even want Pete Alonso, right? But there are the the Kyle Schwarbers, right? Of course, those guys are going to be at the top of everybody's list. But like, you're looking elsewhere, it's like, who else is really going to be available? I feel like it's super, super top heavy and then just kind of meh as far as like the hitters are concerned, and guys like you truly want to bring in, like, sure, you could bring in like a Harrison Bader. He improved, had like career highs in a lot of areas that we were just talking about that the Orioles are very deficient in. Harrison Bader had career highs in a lot of those areas. He could be a great addition. But as far as like a bigger impact bat, and that's really most of the barrel you're looking at as far as free agency. But as far as like a bigger impact bat, I do think that will probably come via trade. And I'd like to see the Orioles spend the money on pitching. spend the money on pitching and trade for the bat. And I feel like it'd be potentially even a little bit easier to trade for the bat if you're able to move some of these excess hitting prospects down there on the farm in exchange for that bat, instead of moving, a Luis De Leon who was shoving this afternoon in the Arizona Fall League. But yeah, like Bob said, we got to wait and see what ends up happening, what the rumors start flying, who's listening, who's potentially wants to be on the move. So no specific names, but I do think I'd like to see trade for the bat, spend the money on the arms this offseason.
Stephen Kwan, I know he's a lefty corner outfielder. It's not the best fit, but I know there were rumors of him being traded at the deadline, potentially. Different type of hitter that maybe the Orioles could use to mix in there. Just trying to look at baseball trade values and just going through their player rankings to see if we can. Kyle would be a great addition. No, yeah, it's hard to do. That's why we don't get paid to do it.
I fully agree with Nick. I'm not in love with this free agent class. I think it's very top heavy, like he just said. So when you get past those very top tier names, it thins out in a hurry. I will throw one name out that's not a star, but he's a solid hitter, veteran bat who hits from the right side and can play first base that I think could get moved this offseason. That's Wilson Contreras of the Cardinals. Now, it's been reported that Contreras has said that he wants to stay in St. Louis, but there's some reasons for the Cardinals to look at moving him. He's owed $36.5 million over the next 2 years, and he's coming off of a pretty good year. 20 homers with a 124 WRC plus before hitting the IL late in the season with a season-ending shoulder injury. And some of the StatCast data is pretty good. 86th percentile in barrel rate, 95th percentile in bat speed, and Contreras is essentially not caught on a full-time basis in 2 years now. So he would really just be a first base DH type. If there's a flaw here, in my mind, it's that he chases a lot. He rarely ever draws a walk, and he's going to strike out. But if the Orioles feel like everybody else improves enough in that area and they can live with the guy who's only going to walk 6% of the time, but mass 25 to 30 homers, that could be a fit. I will acknowledge fully that Contreras is not a star, at least at this point in his career. And if you hear a rumor in the next 4 weeks that the Orioles and Cardinals have been talking about Wilson Contreras, that means the conversation happened 6 months ago and Contreras is not coming to Baltimore. But that's a name I would think about if you're looking at trade options that are very much available and could fit the Orioles' blueprint. Plus, if they take on that contract from the Cardinals, they're not going to have to go up a whole lot in terms of prospect value. And to me, that's not an ideal price for a first base DH type, but it's probably the going rate.
Yeah, wonder if we could. I mean, that is an interesting one. Wonder if you can look at the Rays. I know they have new ownership, but if they're trying to maintain the same type of business that they usually do, you could look at a Jonathan Aranda or Yandy Diaz potentially. But it's so tough. Yeah, how about Ramon Laureano? That would be a good addition there. Yeah, I don't know. Rob Refsnyder, I have, but he's a bench player, not really a game changer on the free agent market, but a nice 2026 version of Ramon Laureano potentially.
It's just leading us down a rabbit hole now. You're just like, all right, let's go through all the rosters and discuss. And like, I'm pulling up the Cardinals roster here, and it's like, okay, first of all, do they have any right-handed hitters?
Jordan
no.
Walker, but
yeah,
he
Jordan
hasn't
Walker's
been good.
I feel like it's been 3 years of they fixed it. It's going to be good, and it's never good. They're all lefties. I don't know if Milwaukee has anything. They can't seem to keep their outfielders healthy, though, at least. Yelich finally again. I don't know.
Love to get Brent Rooker from the A's, but I don't think they're giving up him after they just signed him to an extension not too long ago.
Yeah. We could do this for an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be – yeah. Brian Reynolds as well there, too, in the chat there. We're gonna go through. All right, we're gonna go through episode number 2 now. We weren't gonna do, but we're gonna go through every roster and look at all the right-handed hitting outfielders and debate them.
Hey, that could very well be a future episode because we've got some ground to cover between now and when the off season actually starts. I want to go into our last question of the night, though, which is taking a look at the players who are likely to be back in 2026. Of the Orioles that struggled last year, which player, the Orioles hitters, I should say, that struggled last year, which player are you most confident in them rebounding? On the flip side of that, does anyone have you worried that maybe their regression or their lack of production a year ago is a sign of things to come? And I'm going to start with Nick on this one.
I've stood on this from the very beginning. I'm not going to waver. It wasn't bold standing on this. He was a first round draft pick, fully admit that. But Cowser, I feel pretty good about him going into next year. I know this year was bad when he was on the field. The numbers were pretty atrocious, but when you talk about the broken hand at the end of last year, so no offseason, and then the thumb, whatever it was, sliding in the first base there, and then he comes out that he's playing through broken ribs. Like he didn't have a year. He was hurt, broken bones the entire season for literally almost the past year. So it's just we know what he's capable of. Arguably should have been rookie of the year last year, and that was kind of like he's here and he can do it. Like that, there's your proof. Finally, it's no more, oh, he's doing it in AA, he's doing it in AAA. This is proof that he can do it and be successful in the major leagues. That rookie campaign, which is a lot of fun to see, and you thought it's only going to go up from here for Cowser. He can be a true everyday bat for you in this lineup. But then, the broken hand. So I feel pretty good about Colton Cowser going into next year. I'm not going to waver at this point. I've been on it too long. Been very confident in his game for a very long time. So yeah, that one. If I have to pick somebody, I'm like, I'm worried or skeptical, or I don't even know the right word. Honestly, can I say Jackson Holiday? I know he's young, but I'm thinking like premier Jackson Holiday. Like, are we going to? He's still only 21. He'll be 22 next season. Yeah, he turns 22 in December, so he's still very young. This was still only first full season, second full season, first full season, only 60 games in 2024. There was some good, there was some bad, there was some stuff you wanted to see him take a step forward, and maybe he didn't. I'm just curious, I guess is a better word there. What Jackson Holiday are we going to see in 2026? Is he going to be this, again, premier bat that lives up to all this hype or comes close to living up to all that hype? Can he be like a 90th percentile outcome? Or are the Orioles, by the end of next year or in 2 years, are the Orioles looking at a major upgrade on the infield, and Jackson Holiday is more of a platoonish type player? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and this is probably not going to help our reputation as a positive, too positive of an outlook on things. But I'm really not like looking at anyone and like, oh, really worried about what's going on with this guy, just because a lot of guys miss time. Like Holiday, I'm not super worried about, because over since August 9th to the end of the season, he had a 16.9% walk rate, 15.9% strikeout rate. Yeah, the ISO was down. He only batted 218 with 252 BABIP, which is low for him. But if he's able to, like, that's minor league Jackson Holiday, AAA Jackson Holiday level walk and strikeout numbers. If he's able to do that for a full season, I'm so happy with what he's doing. Cowser, if I had to say there's one guy that I am a little bit concerned about, it probably would be Cowser at the plate. But at the same time, he did not have an offseason last year. He was hurt all year this year. So I do think he's going to make the adjustments. But yeah, 2 years in a row, off-speed stuff really gave him fits. But at the same time, I'm not like super concerned about it. And if there's one guy that I'm like super confident he's going to be locked in and ready to roll and build next season, Kobe Mayo. I think that September was a true sign of progress, a true sign of what's to come. I think he figured something out, and I think he's going to have a really, really solid 2026. And maybe they can't go into the season just say, here, first base is yours, take off. But I feel like it's going to be one of those situations where by midseason, he's an everyday player, and we're not worried about him at all.
I'm going to start with a guy that I will admit I'm probably cheating here a little bit because I don't know that when he was on the field he necessarily regressed. But I think that a healthy Jordan Westberg is going to make a huge difference on this team next season. I think based on the way that he performed when he was healthy last year, there's a good reason to believe that 2024 is not going to go down as a high mark in his career. He had one fewer home run in nearly 100 fewer plate appearances this year. 18 homers and 447 plate appearances last year compared to 17 over 352 this year. I'm sure some of that was the right field wall moving in, but I think that's a reason to be optimistic, especially when we consider that that did not come because he was pulling the ball in the air more often. His pull percentage in the air was actually down last year by quite a bit, and yet he still managed to hit for a little bit more power. So I look for Westberg to be a guy that if he is healthy next year, you're going to see the typical numbers with him where walk rate is low. It's probably going to hit about 265-ish, but he's not going to strike out a ton. And if you can get that, you pair that with 20 to 25 homers at third base with average to above average defense, you take that as a win. And then for the hitter that I'm worried about, and I know I'm opening a huge can of worms here, it's Adley. I just don't know what it's going to look like for him going forward because this has now been a year and a half of him just not hitting the ball as hard as he used to. And you look at his numbers this season and look at his StatCast page in particular. 36th percentile barrel rate, 42nd percentile average exit velocity, hard hit rate 29th percentile. If there's any consolation in his offensive numbers last year is that the same approach that he has had throughout his career that used to be the bread and butter of his success, which was that superior strike zone judgment, was still there. He didn't press, and that's to his credit, but we've also seen him be really banged up over the last 2 years. And I feel like in order to get him back to where he was in 2023 and the first half of 2024, the Orioles have to completely rethink the way they use him. Having Samuel Basallo around is going to help, but I think they need to also look at adding another option for first base this year. And Bob, I thought you actually had an interesting suggestion in your dream offseason. Keep Alex Jackson around as your third catcher. Even if he doesn't catch more than a day or two a week, that's more time off behind the plate for Adley because I'm just at the point where the injuries have piled up so much in the last year and a half. And it has clearly affected his offensive production that I'm concerned that he's having the trajectory that we've seen some catchers have in their late 20s and early 30s, which is start off really well, they hit in their mid 20s, and then the injuries start to pile up and they go from being, decent power hitting catchers to guys that can draw walks from time to time. You keep them around because they're good behind the plate, but when they make contact, they're just not doing any damage.
Yeah, I don't think it's a lock that Alex Jackson is still on the roster come opening day 2026, but he was actually pretty impressive on both sides of the ball. He had a 1.1 WAR in only 100 plate appearances, 37 games played for the Orioles this year. Just a random pickup, 29 years old, former first round pick, number 6 overall. So clearly, at one point, a promising guy. He had a 253 ISO, was hitting the ball hard all over the place. Only walked 5% of the 5% of the time, struck out 37% of the time. So some Jeremiah Jackson-esque things going on there. But yeah, not a terrible guy to have on your bench starting every once in a while if you're planning on moving Basallo around first base DH a lot to keep his bat in the lineup. So yeah.
Don't have to worry about Adley if he's traded. It's every single article is already been doing for the last 3 months. But yeah,
I do like the vote of confidence by Mike Elias in his press conference to be like, Adley's the guy. Adley is here. We're counting on him to, I don't know how much of that is just like pumping him up or just saying it, or they're like, we feel really confident now that we figured something out, or if it's just like smoke. So they do trade him like Bob Nightingale guarantees happens. I don't know, but I did like to hear it anyway.
Yeah, it was good to hear. And I don't think he's going to be traded this offseason. Honestly, I don't want him to be. But there's clearly some warning signs here that the Orioles need to rethink his workload a little bit. And with that, that does it for this week's episode. We'll be back next week, likely to break down the pitching, but we'll see if anything happens between now and then. Perhaps we'll have some news on the managerial search front. We'll have to see what happens over the next week or so here in Birdland. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and decide to become a member of our community today. You can join to $3, $5, or $10 levels and have access to bonus shows from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as our upcoming Top 50 Prospects Countdown update. You're not going to want to miss that. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.